Mets fans, this episode is for you. Welcome back to the Empire State Sports Report. I'm Adrianna, your host. On the Empire State Sports Report, we talk everything New York Giants, New York Yankees, and New York Mets. Today, it is specifically New York Mets. I am joined by jakebrownradio, who talks all things Mets, Jets, does some hockey stuff. So we'll get right into it. But welcome, Jake. I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah, I got to talk about the Mets every day on Mets Daily. So I just consumed by the Mets year round, which probably affects my mental health pretty poorly. But last year, listen, it was the most fun team of my life, and I'm feeling high about the boys in orange and blue and spring training here, pitchers and catchers reporting. Give me every video of a guy walking out to the mound. I don't care if he's just giving a peace sign or just walking and strolling. It's a beautiful sight to see, and also means hopefully sunshine on the way and better baseball weather than the snow outside here in South Jersey.
When I saw that opening day is the end of March, I'm happy because I'm happy that means baseball is coming sooner. But I went to opening day last year and it was April 5th and it was freezing. And now I'm like, there could literally be a snowstorm the end of March on opening day. So can't wait to get out my winter coat and take it to the stadium.
Yeah, I'm debating a trip to Florida just to get away. I think spring training, if you're a baseball fan, I highly recommend at least once checking out spring training, going to the different ballparks. It's just a cool vibe. And, Rays fans, A's fans are going to get it all year for 81 games because they are playing in spring training and minor league stadiums. And I think that's kind of cool for them. But this is your chance to go to a ballpark, go for cheap, see some of the prospects. I always remember when I went to spring training and number 88 was at third base for the New York Mets. And I'm thinking, who is this guy? He's got no name on the back of his jersey. That player ended up being Daniel Murphy, and he was a beloved Met. He was a great national. And I remember seeing him early on when they didn't even have a name on his back because no one knew who he was, and he was brand new. So those are the guys you kind of discover when you're out there in March, baking into the sun. Apply that sunscreen, SPF 30. I think I'm an SPF 30 guy. I'm Italian and Irish, so I get a little tan, a little burnt, a little combination. But yeah, soak it in. I will say though, spring training baseball on TV is hard to watch. Even I'll probably watch it more now that I'm doing a daily show on YouTube. But if I wasn't watching some of these long games with 27 pitchers through 9 innings, can get a little bit tedious.
Yeah, and that's the difference between being there in person. And I've been to spring training before and agree with everything that you said, especially to go when it's so cold here. It's just a perfect opportunity to get out of the Northeast. But it's just fun to feel like baseball is back and there's that excitement in the air, even if you don't have any idea who is actually on the field at that point in the season. But I'm a Yankees fan, and we obviously know that Juan Soto went from the Bronx to Queens. So how are you feeling about Juan Soto? What is your expectation for him this year?
Well, I'm still seeing tweets of Yankee fans calling him tubby and fat, and because of the picture that he had like a shirt and like a sweater tucked in that picture where everyone was like, look at his belly. He was on a bender, since he signed. I think he will be fine. I'm excited. Listen, of course it's an overpay. Anyone with a brain will tell you that he's overpaid. It's an absurd contract, but you're, as dumb as cliche as it is, you're worth what someone is willing to pay you. And the Yankees were willing to go to 760. The Mets said, we'll go to 765. So another team was willing to pay him that. So it means he's clearly worth something close to that. And what I like about him is he's a winner. In the 6 full seasons he's played in baseball, I know he's played more than that, but in 6 full seasons, he has 2 pennants and a World Series ring to his name. And, I think a third of your seasons to win your league, how hard that is to do as a player. And I know it's a full team, but who's leading in WAR for that team that he's with the Nationals, with the Yankees, is Juan Soto. Who's arguably the best player on the team? It's Juan Soto. And the Mets get him at 26 years old in the prime of his career. And, he's already had insane numbers at Citi Field as a visitor. Now we get to see him for 81 games in that building. Bringing that Dominican flair to a team that has a lot of Latino players, I think is huge for the Mets. Los Mets was the big thing in 2006 with Beltran, Delgado, Reyes. Now you got Beltran, Lindor, Vientos. So I think the Mets have some swagger. They got some moxie. And the goal in the 15 years is to probably win. If you win 1, maybe even 2 World Series in Juan Soto's contract, it's a success. It's a success story. The Mets have waited 4 decades for a championship. So you could think one World Series in 15 years, that's nothing. But for the Mets, it's more than they've had in 4 decades. So I think it's going to be tough to win a ring this year, but I think Soto is going to. A lot of people are like, the Mets have done nothing since Soto before Alonso's side. Well, listen, what he does to the guy in front of him, the guy behind him, and everyone else in the lineup, you saw it with the Yankees, that trickle-down effect, that domino effect that Juan Soto provides for a lineup, moves mountains, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. And, my thing with the Yankees, and I don't know how much fans really talked about this, but I just think the reality with Cohen was that he was not going to be outbid. And I think that even if they went to $1 billion, Steve Cohen was going to go to 1.1, he was always going to go there. And I think if you're a fan of the Mets, you have to feel like, well, I've got an owner who's dedicated to winning, where there are some teams out there who are not spending any money and not doing anything. And, when I look at some of the moves that the Mets made after Juan Soto, they brought back Sean Manaea, Jesse Winkler. They recently just brought back Jeff Smith. Is that right?
Drew Smith today.
Drew
Yes,
Smith.
Drew Smith, yeah. So Drew Smith is 1 year deal. He might miss the season because he had Tommy John surgery, but second-year club option.
Okay. So they're still making some other moves. The biggest pain point that I hear from Mets fans, I think right now, is the rotation. So tell me about your thoughts on that. I know we briefly talked earlier about comparing it to the Dodgers, and the way that I feel is like no one is beating the Dodgers this year, but you never know. But I think it's hard when you compare any team, whether it's the Yankees or the Mets or literally anyone else, to the Dodgers, because it just feels like they're doing everything right, and they've already had so much success that we know the process that they're doing is the right one. And I feel this way about the Eagles. I feel like Howie Roseman just knows what he's doing, and he's done a damn good job. And if you've got someone in the front office who knows how to do that, you have to feel pretty confident that they've got it figured out.
For the first time ever, the Mets have had a structure from ownership to GM to manager that is aligned. Like, it's been a long time. The Wilpons were cheap, and we look back to Brody Van Wagenen, big moves of his offseason. It was like signing 39-year-old Rick Porcello, trading for backup outfielder Jake Marisnick. Like, now it's Juan Soto, it's Pete Alonso, it's Sean Manaea. So it is a massive difference. And David Stearns is a baseball genius. I watched a really good interview with him and Pablo Torre on his show last night I was watching, and you could just tell this guy thinks different, and he's built different. And the Soto is a one-off contract. The other moves are Stearns being smart and not spending like a drunken sailor. And I think the previous regimes, and most recently before him, spent like a drunken sailor in terms of Verlander and Scherzer and what they did in 2022. And then it really crap in the bed in 2023 for the team. And they realized, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that approach of handing out these $40 million a year deals for guys who are 40 years old. It's probably not going to work. And it didn't work. They made the wild card round in 2022, but they crashed out in 2023. So the fact that David Stearns in his first year, with the first-year manager and former Yankee coach Carlos Mendoza, who was so even keeled. I've went through Mets managers that decisions I still lose sleep over today, years later, whether it was Terry Collins, Luis Rojas, Mickey Callaway. I don't even want to utter his name. They had a manager who was even keel, who never said it. Like, I can't remember one quote from Carlos Mendoza, and I think that's a beautiful thing, because you don't want to remember some of the things these guys say. Like Luis Rojas, and Yankee coach now, used to say, oh, he had too many up downs, I didn't want to bring him. Up down my ass. Like, what do you mean up down? Stop it.
Right.
Like, put the guy back out there, have some kind of feel for the game. And I think the mix of, and I'm going on a spiel here, but the mix of analytics used with brains that both Stearns and both Mendoza provide, with Cohen providing the cash and letting the baseball guys handle it, is different than past Mets regimes. It's different than Epler, Brody, Buck Showalter. It's just different, and I think it works. On the rotation, what you originally asked about, like you said, you can't compare to the Dodgers. The Dodgers number 7 starter is like Clayton Kershaw. It's just absurd what they are putting out there, and you can't compare to them. All you can compare to is the other teams in your division and maybe other teams around the league. And yeah, the Mets don't have a world beater rotation, but what they have is an elite pitching coach in Jeremy Hefner, who turned, molehills into mountains. He turned Luis Severino from the worst pitcher in the league to getting the highest contract in A's history at 3 years, $67 million. He turned Sean Manaea from a 4-starter into essentially the Mets ace. He's turned relievers like Jose Buto from a AAA minor league starter to an elite bullpen piece. So the Mets are relying heavily on their coaching. And listen, Manaea may not be your prototypical ace. he's a number 1 or 2 for a lot of teams in Major League Baseball. He changed his arm slot in July. He produced even better after that arm slot change. He had a really good year. The Mets were 2 wins away from a pennant without Kodai Senga pitching all year. The one start he made, you saw me behind the dugout with the OMG sign, waving it, and then, me celebrating, and then the 6th inning, his calf is broken, and he's out for the year. Ugh. So a lot of people forget how good Kodai Senga was in 2023. That ghost forkball is one of the best pitches of our generation. It's a pitch that no one's even seen before, and it resulted in a sub-3 ERA. David Peterson, a sub-3 ERA. Where Mets fans are worried, and I get it, but I wouldn't worry too much, is Clay Holmes, former Yankee, becoming a starter, which he hasn't done since 2018, his rookie year. So we don't know. I think it's not fair to write him off because we don't know. When he made 2 All-Star appearances the last 3 years, I know he was a headache for Yankee fans as closer. Being a number 4 starter is nowhere near being a closer of the New York Yankees. It's just a lesser leverage role, and you're not asking him to throw 8 innings. Like, just give me 5 innings of 1-run ball. Give me 6 innings of 2-run ball, and you'll sign up for that every day of the week. And then Frankie Montas, another former Yankee, where fans are saying, listen, I agree that they signed him too early in the offseason, give him 2 years, 34. You probably could have got someone better for a little cheaper. But I think their hope is that Montas goes back to that guy in 2019 who was the ace of the A's, who was a frontline starting pitcher, who has had some success in the big leagues. And their hope is he's kind of like that reclamation project. But what they like out of him, and remember, he's a number 5 starter. Most teams don't have an elite pitcher as their number 5, is that he makes 30 starts and he eats innings. And that's what the Mets want out of a number 5, is they want a guy that's going to stay healthy, give you some quality starts. Something that always sticks in my head was me. I did the Amazing But True podcast with the New York Post with Nelson Figueroa for 4 years. Figgy always said to me, and you look at his career ERA, I think Figgy, who was a bum, and I joke with him, I'm like Figgy, you were a number 4 or 5 minor leaguer, but he lasted a while because his career ERA was right around a walking quality start. It was 4.55, and when people today see a 4.5 ERA, they call that guy a bum. That's 6 innings, 3-run ball. And when you have a lineup that the Mets have, if you're giving me a 4.5 ERA as a number 5, which is likely what Montas will be, you're pitching a quality start every time. That's what that means. And that's all the Mets need out of him. So before writing off the rotation, realize they got 3 guys with a lot of potential up front, 2 question marks that have potential in the back end, and depth. Canning, McGill, Blackburn, all not very good, but all quality number 5, 6 starters. So, and guess what? If it doesn't work, David Stearns has showed he will add if he needs to. Look what he did. He added Winker. He added Stanek. He added Phil Maytone. He added Blackburn. He will add and make moves in July if he sees the need to do so. And there's always pitchers and players available before the trade deadline from one of these teams that are out of it. There will be someone out there. So I wouldn't lose sleep about the opening day rotation, because the opening day rotation is never the October rotation. Rotations change, bullpens change, rosters change, and if the Mets need to make changes, they will.
Totally. And my whole thing with Clay Holmes as a Yankee fan is just like, he obviously wasn't working as a closer. And I blame the Yankees for continually forcing it, because I feel like a lot of the time with these players, whether it's any sport, I mean, I could name probably 10 different Giants who I've seen that when they lose their confidence, they don't bring it back overnight. It takes a lot of time. And when we talk about the New York market and how challenging it is, when the confidence goes, it's really hard to build it back up. And I think that was a big reason as to why Clay Holmes continued to struggle. And I just feel like the Yankees never pulled him out of it, and they never gave him a chance to redeem himself in a different position. And I feel like, the fact that he's going to the Mets, he's on the other side of town, that alone, I'm sure is going to make a little bit of a difference. But on top of that, they're moving him back to the starter, which I think he is going to be overall in a better position. I think he's going to feel like he has his confidence back. And like you said, he's not going to be the number 1 guy all the time. He's going to be part of the rotation. He's going to be someone that they rely on, but he's not going to be the ace. He's not going to be the Cy Young winner. So it's not going to have also that type of pressure put on him. So I actually think that Clay Holmes to the Mets was the right move. And I think that especially moving him over to the starter as opposed to the closer is a huge thing. So I think that is also going to make a really big difference.
And 12 million is not crazy for number 4. Like if Matas makes 17 and he's your 4 or 5, Holmes at 12 if it works out. And a lot of people don't realize he's going to add at least 1, maybe 2 pitches to his arsenal. Relievers don't use as many pitches because they're only in there for 1 inning. You know, they don't want to make it too confusing on a catcher. He's going 5 or 6 innings. He's going to add, I forget the pitch that he's adding. I think it's a slider, but I forget the pitch he's going to add to his arsenal and his pitch mix, but it's going to make a difference. And you know, there were times he was dominant, and I agree with you. And I've said it on my show as well, is like, people are like, good luck with Clay Holmes. I'm like, if Aaron Boone, you know, put him in a lesser leverage role earlier on, it would have made a massive difference for his mentals. And, you know, the Mets did it with Edwin Diaz. When Edwin Diaz was struggling, he admitted, I don't have much confidence in my stuff right now. Holmes probably didn't have confidence, and Boone said, no, we'll trust him. You know, a good manager realizes that, makes a change, goes to Canely, goes to, you know, Weaver, goes to someone else in that spot. And I just think they kept him out. You know, after 2 or 3 times, they probably should have been, all right, let's put him in mop-up duty, then work his way back to being the 9th inning guy. Now he knows he's either the number 4, number 5. I don't know how they're going to work 3, 4, 5, but he'll be probably the 4 or the 5, pitch in potentially a 6-man rotation, which means even less pressure, you know, for the Mets. So I think it's going to work out. And if it doesn't, you know, it doesn't. But I think the other side of it is, if you're in the playoffs, which the Mets are projected to be a playoff team, he can be your Swiss Army knife. He can be your setup man for Edwin Diaz, because I wouldn't imagine he's a starter coming playoff time. But, man, if you could have him, A.J. Minter, and Edwin Diaz at the back end of a playoff bullpen, that's one of the best in the league. And he could really be a true weapon late in the season in October, because I imagine he's going to have an innings limit. They're not going to go crazy on him in terms of innings, which makes me think that October he will be more of a setup man.
Yeah. Let's switch over to the batter's box. And what are you thinking about the lineup? I know obviously it's still early, and like we talked about, you know, there's going to be a ton of changes from now until opening day and even after that. But obviously adding Juan Soto, like we talked about too, is a huge bolster to any lineup. And it's not just about the fact that he's a power hitter. On top of that, he was the number 1 hitter last year for always getting on base, whether that was a walk, a base hit, or some sort of double or whatever. But he's a strong hitter across the board, and he's really good in the batter's box. So you can virtually guarantee that probably 8 out of 10 times he's going to get on base. So obviously you add that to your lineup, and that's huge alone. But from there, how are you feeling about what you think the lineup is going to shape up to be, and what you think the hitters are going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, off the top, it's almost a lock to be Lindor, Soto 1-2 every day for 162 games, and then it's kind of however Mendoza wants to manage the rest of the lineup card. But you know, some people have said, you know, maybe put Soto in the 3, split up, you know, against righty, so you don't have lefty back to back. Maybe it's Lindor, you know, Vientos, Soto, depending who's pitching. To me, it's not that big of a deal, you know, with the bullpen rule where you got to face 3 hitters if you're starting an inning. I don't think it's the biggest thing in the world to have lefty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty. But that's pretty much 1-2 Lindor, Soto. And I mean, that's as good as it gets right there. Lindor was, you know, take Ohtani out of the equation. Lindor was the MVP. You know, Ohtani obviously had the year he had, but he also didn't play the field. You know, Lindor was kind of the MVP of the league, the National League. And, you know, if you're a Met fan like me and watch all the games, there was no one more clutch you wanted up than Francisco Lindor. I was on the team of move on from Pete Alonso. I didn't really want to pay him. I see he's regressing. I don't think he's the best overall protection for Soto, but you can't argue with the fact, hey, maybe hitting behind Juan Soto makes him better. He's going to have more pitches to hit. You know, he needs to get on base more. Like, they all need to follow the Soto model. Like, stop swinging out of your shoes. And I think the downside of Soto is they're going to walk him a lot to face someone like Pete Alonso with, you know, 172 strikeouts last year. He's a big strikeout, double play candidate. He's slow as molasses. So, you know, Pete also needs to realize, like, I think he knows. He saw what happened in free agency. It didn't go the way he wanted. He needs to have a massive year, because if he has another bad year, he'll opt into that second year for $24 million. If he has a great year, he moves on, and maybe the Mets get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think that's the dream of me and many Mets fans, is they move on from Pete and get Vladdy. But listen, Vientos now a full season. He had 27 homers in a year he wasn't there from opening day. You know, he played like, I think 110, 120 games. Now you play him 155, 160. Vientos should be a 30, 35 homer guy. Lindor, a 30 homer guy. Soto, a 35 to 40 homer guy. Alonso, a 35 to 40 plus home run guy. You know, Brandon Nimmo hit 25 homers last year. Alvarez, they're expecting to bounce back, hit 20. Siri is a guy who's, needs better plate discipline, but he had 25 homers in 2023. Why can't he be a 25 homer guy? So from top to bottom, the Mets do not lack power in the slightest. What they do lack is maybe some plate discipline and ability to steal bases. Outside of Lindor, outside of Marte, they don't steal a ton of bags, and that's something in today's baseball. And what the Dodgers do really well is they steal a lot. So my concerns with the Mets is speed and stealing bases. Now, Siri, if he gets on more, he's a guy with plenty of speed, but he hit 180 last year. He's got to hit better than 180. He's got to be a 225 hitter, maybe a 300 OBP, steal you 25 bags, because that balances out the order. Like if you have Lindor leadoff stealing 30, you have Marte in a 5 or 6 spot against lefties stealing 25, 30, and then Siri in the 9-hole stealing 30. There's your 90 stolen bases from 3 guys, and then you're talking about a more of a complete lineup that's not just a bunch of power hitters. So I think the Mets offense, we know what Soto Lindor is going to bring. Alonso, what it likely he'll bring. A lot will rely on Alvarez having a bounce back year. What they get at second base is Jeff McNeil, the second half happy Jeff, or is he the angry Jeff who's throwing his bat and, cursing, running off the field every time? Because if he is, then we add more speed with Luis Angel Acuna. And those young kids wait for the summertime, and maybe we see some Mauricio, some Acuna, and some of this youth movement, maybe a Jet Williams. That's going to be the other layer of this Mets offense. When, if and when do we see those young, speedy, talented prospects get their shot? Or do the veterans prove themselves enough that they're the main guys? So I think it's a good problem to have, and it's going to be exciting. And another big thing to watch is Brandon Nimmo. Will that plantar fasciitis affect him? How many games will he miss? That's a very tough thing to deal with, playing left field every day. Is there going to be days he has to sit? Is there days he's going to be at, DH? Mets have Winker and Marte as their platoon DH right now, but you got to factor in some of these days, guys are going to need days off or days off their feet in the field. And if that plantar fasciitis comes back and plagues Nimmo, it hurts the Mets in the middle of that order, because he's slotted as really probably the number 5 hitter right now. So a lot of layers to watch, but all good things. And it's a lineup that does have a lot of exciting things. And, I'm excited to see that Soto shuffle in Queens, baby. It's going to be fun. And, I hope he's a 40 homer guy. I hope he doesn't walk too much where it takes away his power numbers, because, the Mets do need those extra base hits from Juan Soto.
Yeah. And one of the things, too, that we noticed as Yankee fans last year was the fact that he really taught some of the younger guys, especially someone like Volpe, how to sit and wait when you're at the plate instead of always reaching for balls. He really mentored him, I think, and helped him become a better batter. And I think that that's something that as a Mets fan too, you can be excited about, knowing that Soto has that type of history. So when you mentioned earlier that you want some of those younger players to be able to do that, then Soto, I think, is going to be the guy for that. So you also said that the Mets are projected to be a playoff team. How do you feel about the Mets this year in the NL East, knowing some of the moves that the other teams made? Obviously, the Phillies being a big other team to watch. I think them and maybe the Nationals are probably going to be the top other 2 teams.
Yeah, the Phillies are not great. They didn't add much. Nationals are kind of rebuilding. I think they're going to be a 4th place team. It's really down to the Braves, the Phillies, the Mets. It's going to be a 3-team race. Listen, the Braves, I think, if you have to say who has a better lineup in the league than the Mets right now, it's the Dodgers, and you could argue that the Braves have a better lineup overall top to bottom than the Mets. But the Phillies, the only thing they did was add Jesus Luzardo and Max Kepler. They didn't really do enough to make me think that they're going to win the division again. They had a couple of good months early on, and then they kind of tailed off. They were trying to trade off pieces. Nobody wanted them. They tried to trade Castellanos. They tried to trade Bohm. Nobody really wanted them. So I think the Phillies regress, but are in the running for a wild card. I think the division, the projections are the Mets to have 91 wins, the Braves to have around 92. I think that's going to be it. It's going to come down to the final weekend between the Mets and Braves for this division. I think the Braves rotation has a lot of question marks. Obviously, they lose Free to the Yankees. They lose Charlie Morton. They're relying on some youth movement in that rotation, and they're relying on health. It's a team that's dealt with a lot of bad health the last few years, where Ronald Acuna just cannot stay healthy. Spencer Strider is like a Tommy John waiting to happen every year, with how fast he throws. But, they have a lot of question marks on that pitching staff in Atlanta. I think they're relying a lot on their offense, but, the old adage is pitching wins ball games, and a lot of people will knock the Mets for that. They say, look at their rotation. It's not a world beater rotation. So I think it's going to be a lot of Bash brothers, in Queens and in Atlanta, and a lot of home runs and a lot of power that carries those teams to win. As much as pitching wins ball games, it's going to be a lot of bashing wins ball games for both those teams. And, if I had to project right now, I'd probably say the Braves in the division, with the Mets maybe like the projection say a game behind. And then the Phillies in the running for a wild card. That wild card is going to be tough because the Diamondbacks are really good. I think the Diamondbacks are a dark horse NL championship team. Dodgers obviously win the division. You're probably going to have the Giants in the wild card race. That's going to be interesting to watch the Giants, although it's an odd year. It seems like they only win an even year as the Giants. So we'll see if they can win in an odd year. And the Central, who knows in the Central? I think the Cubs are going to be in it. The Reds are a good young team, but in the East, Mets, Braves with the Phillies on the outside looking in for playoff spots.
It's going to be interesting. And the one thing that I do like about baseball season, that it is so long. So, if the season starts out slow or for whatever reason, you're not really optimistic, which is how I felt, over the last couple of years. And then all of a sudden by the summer, things can really turn around. So it is exciting in that feeling that, their projection is the playoff bound. You feel like they're headed in the right direction. Now we just have to see it on the field. I want to hear about the Mets Amazing Day, because I believe this was the first time that they did it. And I see the thing back there. I follow a bunch of Mets creators too, and it looked amazing. No pun intended. But so tell me what it was like.
Yeah, it was remarkable. It was. I'm shocked the Yankees don't listen. The Yankees. Listen, their PR, they're very tight-lipped. Their PR is tough. They are not the friendliest of organizations, I hate to say, from dealing with them and behind the scenes. But the Mets are friendly. We're family friendly. As Soto said, as a lot of free agents said, they treat the families right. And, Alex Cohen was watching me, and, Mets owner watching me get a shape up in a suite at Citi Field on Amazing Day. It was glorious. I said, Alex, do you want to sit down and get a cut with me? And she has her, I'm sure her rich people barbers that she goes to. She said that she just got a haircut the other day. I said, all right, we could have had a nice, barbershop talk. It would have been a new show. Yeah. It would have been electric. Give me some insight on the team, but things like that. It was so cool. And someone gave me tickets, but a normal fan is $40, which isn't crazy. The VIP was like $9. If you spend VIP, you just you make a good amount of money. I think that would have been a waste to spend that much, but for $40, what was cool about it is everyone walked by you. And I think this is why it's going to become a thing every year. You could get into certain levels that a normal fan couldn't get into. I'm always in suites and fancy and I'm bougie, but a regular average fan, which is what this is for. It's not for Jake Brown. It's for the average fan, which is what I love. And I am an average fan. I just, know people. So, and I've been around a long time. I've earned this. I've put 10 years of hard blood, sweat, tears, and all my hair into this. So I've earned what I get when I go there. But, I thought they did the barber shop, the giveaways. You essentially walk by the suite level, and for 1 second, David Wright walks by. Another second, Starling Marte walks by. Another second, Doc Gooden walks by. Every generation of Met players were there, from Butch Husky to my old co-host Figgy. I was shocked. He even got. They had the average players show up. R.A. Dickey, Josh Tolley, random obscure Benny Agbayani, who was a fan favorite in the 2000 Mets. They had every generation from the 69 Mets to the 86 Mets to the 2000 Mets to the 06 Mets to the 2015 Mets to the obscure, 2012 Mets to today's Mets. And they were just the access to walk by them. Now, I feel bad for them because everyone was trying to get selfies while they were moving place to place. Sure. But the different sponsors, they had games. Like I said, the barbershop, you could get a haircut while in a suite. Not all fans get to experience a suite. To get to be in a suite and get a haircut, in your ballpark is awesome. They had little trinkets they would give you, shades or headbands or hat or whatever, or a food item. I thought it was very well. I think it was a little too overcrowded, and for people who did get autographs, I didn't. But for people who waited autograph lines, the lines were nuts. It was a little unorganized, but I think they'll learn from this and make it better. But man, what an event. I hope it becomes a tradition. And I think the Yankees need to learn something to do it too, because I also think it encourages people to get tickets and want to come back to the ballpark, because you see some of these kids' faces. I got a great video that blew up of a kid crying meeting David Wright. And those kind of moments is just, it's glorious. And it brings back me as a child. Like I've got to interview a lot of these guys now, but even when I did interview them, like I was pinching myself a bit when David Wright or Mike Piazza are on the side of the phone. I was like, wow, these were my heroes. Like guys that when I met David Wright at the Atlanta Team Hotel when I was 16, 17 years old, I was shaking next to a picture that said no autographs with players. I obviously asked for an autograph with a player. And now he's standing next to you at Amazing Day. Like the different generations, and it wasn't just for kids, adults, everyone from young to old to in between got all they could have asked for. And, I thought the Mets did a terrific job with it. And I hope it becomes a thing every year.
I love it. I think it's so awesome that they did that. And the thing that I love so much about New York sports, and I think you could say this about a lot of different areas, but I see it the most with people who I know are New York fans, is if you grow up a New York fan, you are loyal until you die. If you're a Mets fan, you didn't change your mind and become a Yankees fan because the Mets were not good for however many years when the Yankees were winning World Series. Like that's not how it works. It's the same thing with Jets fans. Like I actually give a lot of credit to Jets fans because they are so bad for so long. But it's like at some point you want to feel like as a fan that has struggled through years of hardship supporting these teams and spending your hard-earned money. I mean, I go to games with my cousins and my aunts and my uncles. Like it's a family affair. And it's great because we all have a lot of fun and we make all these memories and it's things that we'll always look back on. But it's also just a testament that through years and years, the reason we are still fans is because our grandpa got us into the game, or, our mom was a diehard fan for however many years. It always comes back to family. And I feel like that the Mets are able to replicate that in an event like this is so important. And I wish that the Yankees and other teams would get on board because it's just a testament to the loyalty of the fan bases that have really been here through a lot of really bad. And then, we're waiting to finally see the something good.
Yeah. Preaching family is so important because remember, when you go to these games, it's families. Like when they do these 4-pack of tickets and the $1 hot dog night, it's about bringing the family at an affordable rate. And that's what this is all about. And it's funny for me, my first, 1 year, I was a Yankee and Giant fan first and then switched to the crappier teams in the Mets and Jets. I don't know what the hell got into me.
Oh my God.
But 97, 98, I was living in Little Neck in Queens, New York. We moved to Connecticut when I was 7 in 98. And my first friend I kind of made in Connecticut was a big Mets fan. It got me into the Mets. And I was so young. I was like, all right, I'll ditch the Yankees. My family, my dad, my brother was Yankee fans. So I kind of followed them. I remember the Scholastic Book Fair. I got a Derek Jeter poster. Now I would probably burn that poster because I'm not a Derek Jeter guy. But I switched to the Mets, and the first year, my favorite player was Tiki Barber. They made the Super Bowl. I got the Tiki Barber Super Bowl jersey. Later in my life, he sang to me on my podcast, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire. He's got a beautiful voice,
Wow.
And yeah, he's the only football player on NYC Broadway. It was in Kinky Boots. No other football player besides Eddie George. Yeah, Eddie George was the only other football player to be in a Broadway show, and Tiki Barber was in Kinky Boots. Fun fact. Wow. But yeah, so I was a Giant fan the year they made the Super Bowl. The Yankees won. Then I switched. Mets make the World Series 2000, and then the rest of my life was ruined. I switched to the Jets. They make the playoffs a couple of years, and now in the last 15 years, they haven't had a playoff appearance. So I clearly made the wrong decision switching, but I wasn't the one that switched to the bandwagon team. I switched to the team that ended up being worse. So yeah, 22 years in a row, it'll be me and my dad have gone to the Mets home opener this year. So only fitting to get Juan Soto, number 22, that this will be 22 in a row. And, it's become kind of the only game he goes to. So it's kind of extra special for me. And I think for him that we get to go to that game because we grew up going together, every other weekend, every couple of weekends, I collected sports card and memorabilia. So, if it was a 7 p.m. at 1 p.m., we'd go to the sports card show in Westchester, get the cards, meet some of the 1969 Mets, get a picture signed, get cards, and then hop in the car and go to Shea Stadium and go to the game together. And, we had a Saturday plan in 2002. Mo Vaughn was on the team. So, yeah, I grew up going with my dad. Now he couldn't care less. Like, he doesn't really watch as much. And I think older people, sometimes they lose interest because the players are making too much money. They're not loyal to the team. They just care about the money. It's the old person talk. But, he is the one that got me into it. And, my mom being friends, or growing up with Lee Mazzilli and going to the same high school with him. And, she was a Mets fan. Howie Rose asked her out on a date in the early 80s. she ended up talking to what would be my dad and then interviewing Howie, and he remembers the story of meeting her at the car dealership. It's just like all these things come full. I could write a book. Like there's all these things come full circle in life, but it's really your family that it's rare that you just grow up and you get into it by yourself. It's someone that got you into it. And that's why family is so important. I know Vin Diesel says the same thing. It's all about family.
And Steve Cohen too.
Yes. I love Steve Cohen. Listen, he has changed he's changed the face of the franchise. Like this was a laughing stock franchise that is now more respected. And now the last step's a win. Win that damn ring. And I'm 15 minutes from Philly. I'm going to, be around the parade on Friday. I want a parade for the New York Mets. The Yankees have got their parades. The Giants have got the parades. That's the only parade I've been to was the New York Giants. 2008, 2012, the only parades I went to. And, I'd root for the Giants as well to do well. So I'd like a parade for the Mets. And this fan base is starving. Like there's a reason I'm so passionate about it because I want it so bad. I envision scenarios where they win and get, maybe it's the softy in me, but I get emotional. Like I think about that parade and winning that championship. What do it mean to me? And all this time, like I've put into not just being a fan, the money I've put in, doing these shows, everything, and a lot of it unpaid. And you're dropping the money, and I've essentially invested. I'm like Steve Cohen Jr. with the money I've invested into this team. So for that championship to finally come, and if it does come this year, next year, is going to mean the world to me. It's going to mean the world to this entire fan base, and it's going to be a moment that we're all going to hug and kiss hands, shake babies, shake hands, kiss babies, whatever the saying is.
Whatever it is.
I can't wait for that moment to happen. And it better happen because I have no hair left to pull out of my head and I need it so bad.
Yeah. And they got Juan Soto. So this is the beginning for the Mets. I do think that they're going to have a good year. So pitchers and catchers have reported. We are ready to get started. Tell us about where we can find you. You do a Mets daily show. So for everyone who wants Mets content every day, tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm excited about the show. It's partnered with Fan Arch. I launched the first week of January. We were 1 month in and just being consistent, 10 to 15 minute show. Good thumbnail. They get a little sensationalized with the headlines, which I hate, but I don't control that. And clearly it's working because we're getting clicks. But in 1 month, we have 1,100 subscribers, 4,500 watch hours, 70,000 views. So the numbers have been so good for the first month. So it's motivated me because, listen, the fourth quarter for me of 2024 was tough with losing a job, moving from New York, everything that was happening, getting a job, then they back out of an offer in December. I had a lot of crap go down that sucked the life out of me. So this show has kind of brought a lot of juice back into me. I'm writing for the SI as part of Sports Illustrated, but you're not really allowed to call it that out. It's called Mets on SI. Put my first 2 stories out last week. My first one was like the second most viewed of the month on the site. So 2 stories out there. Be writing for the Mets on SI site, Mets Daily. I'll likely during the season still do the Mets Magic podcast. And that will be more of a guest featured show where I'll do a weekly guest on there. But yeah, Mets Daily, youtube.com/@MetsDaily. Subscribe if you're a Met fan. Even if you're not, you want to hear about the Mets every day and rants and ramblings. And, it's encouraging that the month, first month that did well is when almost nothing was going on. Like they signed Ryan Stanek, Jesse Winker. They didn't really do much and it was doing well. So that shows you the Met fan, and, Yankee fans too, and baseball fans in general, they're craving content right now. They're craving something to talk about, something to hear about with their team. And the hot stove, is almost nothing better than the baseball hot stove because on a Sunday night in December, Juan Soto will sign with the Mets and it'll break your phone. It'll break the internet and those massive signings, the passing bombs. There's nothing better in the offseason when you're craving baseball to get that news. So I've enjoyed doing Mets Daily and just Jake Brown Radio on all socials. I do TikTok lives a lot too, Instagram posts, all that, all the social media at Jake Brown Radio. But excited about that. And every day, 10 to 15 minutes, a nice short little appetizer, not too long. And just enough because I could yap, as you can see, forever and ever. So to cut me off on a time limit is very much needed.
I feel the same way, which is why I'm always like, this is going to be a short podcast episode. And then 25 minutes later, I'm like, what did I even talk about for that long? I don't even know.
It flies by, right? It just flies by.
It does. So I will link everything in the show notes for all my Mets fans. Make sure you head to Jake Brown Radio on socials and then make sure you check out his daily Mets show. And I will link everything for you guys. And Jake, this was great. As it gets closer to the season, we'll do this again and we can talk more Mets.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And listen, I think the Yankees are good too. I think the Yankees need another infielder. Like they need
Yeah.
another hitter. I don't think Oswaldo Cabrera should be an everyday player. So I'm curious to see what they add. But I think the Yankees have had a really good pivot from Juan Soto. I like what they've done. So I think, if the almighty Mets could just knock out the Avenger Dodgers,
Yes.
we could be on, track for a Subway Series. Fingers crossed. Thank you for having me. And yeah, we'll talk again soon.
I would be on board for that for sure.
Listen, we were so close, like 2 wins
I know,
away. We would have cooked you guys in the World Series. The Mets would have won
probably.
the World Series. We swept you in the regular season. But Subway Series is going to be must watch. Soto back in the Bronx in May. That's a must see event. I'll probably come up for that game. And the rivalry is only going to get better with both teams being good.
It's going to be fun. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.